Can you take the flowers off and place them on by the grave for me, please? Okay, gentlemen. Just walk on the planks, please.
Well, a very good afternoon to you all. My name is Claire Mountain and we are here today to say goodbye and pay our respects to the lovely Betty, who passed away on the 10th of March at the Hollies Residential Care Home. Whilst we are here today primarily to say goodbye, we can briefly remember the life of Betty. However, it is important that we acknowledge our grief here today, because we know that her death has left a gap in your lives, and a gap that will never be filled. Betty May Barwell was born on the 25th of February in 1925 in Anisabul to loving parents Jonathan and Bessie Evans. She grew up alongside her 3 sisters and 2 brothers, and she was a happy child who always loved to sing. Sadly, only her sister Marion is now with us, but we know that her thoughts are with us today. When Betty was just 15 years old, she sought employment in service as a maid for a family living in Kent. But just after the Second World War, she started to move and went on to Coventry, where she worked in a local post office. It was in Coventry that she met her first husband. She then moved with him to Edinburgh, and they were blessed with a beautiful little girl called Anne. When Anne was still a baby, Betty's marriage ended. But Betty managed to pick up the pieces, and she moved her and Anne to a place of their own. Then heartbreak was to come again, when she tragically lost Anne at the age of 14 to leukemia. Some years later, Betty went on her first cruise with her close girlfriend. She met Lawrence Barwell, and eventually they got married. They settled in Nottingham, and their marriage spun over 40 years, and those 40 years were filled with happiness and wonderful memories. But also during those years, they would go on their cruises, and they liked to go at least twice a year. She sadly lost Lawrence when he passed away in 2012. But Betty continued to live independently for 4 years before eventually realising that she could no longer look after herself. Then in September of 2017, she went to live in a care home in Nottingham. In March of 2018, Betty was brought to a care home in Pontypridd so that she could be near her family. She lived the rest of her days at the Hollies Care Home. She was always a lady that laughed. She enjoyed smiling, even in the last months of her life. So much so, she would often make herself cry. She was a very independent lady, a loving lady, and kind. Betty was loved by everybody that knew her, and she will be greatly missed. But I'd like to share a short verse with you, and it's called Take Me Home. I remember the face of my father as I walked back from the mine. He laughed and he'd say, "That's one more day, and it's good to feel the sunshine." I remember my mother was smiling as I sat out to make my own way. She seemed to know that I had to go, but I'd come back home one day. Take me home to my family. Take me home to my friends. Take me home where my heart lies. And let me sing again. Now the years have rolled by around me. I've seen the sunshine and rain. It's been a long since I've heard that song, but I dream of home once again. Well, sadly the time has come, and we all have to prepare to say our final goodbyes to Betty, as in a few moments we will leave the graveside and she will no longer be within our view. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, there are some in this world who say that will be forever, and yet others, well, they say only until a better time or place. But those of you here today, I ask you to please remember that it is only her body that we commit to the ground, not her personality, not her soul, and not even her spirit, because these will remain alive forever in your minds, in your memories, but most of all within all of your hearts. I'd like to share a short verse before we say goodbye. It's called Something Beautiful Remains. The tide recedes but leaves behind bright seashells on the sand. The sun goes down but gentle warmth still lingers on the land. The music stops and yet it echoes on in sweet refrains. For every joy that passes, something beautiful remains. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we will remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember her. For so long as we live, she too shall live, for she is now a part of all of us as we remember her. Peacefully as sleep comes to a dear beloved heart, and quietly we understand the time has come to part. Tenderly the love shines on, a never-ending light, and gratefully we feel its warmth and say, we love you, Betty. Good night.